Yo, what's going on everybody? It's your boy Zo Ordinary, aka Just Ordinary. Now, as you saw from the thumbnail and the title, I'm gonna be talking about Kizaru today because I really think Admirals have been downplayed lately and they really need to, make a comeback. We need to gas them up again. Ever since the Greenbow incident with Shanks, it's just been nothing but slander against the Admirals. And I feel like Greenbow wasn't really a good representation of the Admirals as a whole. Because, come on, let's be honest, it was Shanks that did that. It wasn't another character. We know Shanks, most likely as of right now, he's most likely top 1, top 2, maybe top 3. And I also think that when it comes to the Admirals, the first 3 Admirals, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Akainu, are ahead of Greenbow and Fujitora. Now, what I'm trying to say is that I think there's different tiers in the Admiral level system. Not all Admirals are the same strength, of course, because you have Akainu, who's a fleet Admiral, and most likely the strongest Admiral out of all of them. Which then gets in the whole topic of whether or not Yonkos are stronger than Admirals, or Admirals are stronger than Yonkos, or if they're equal, which we'll get into in a bit. But first I want to discuss what Kizaru brings to the table as an Admiral and what his strengths and weaknesses are. So starting it off, we have Kizaru's Devil Fruit, the Pika Pika no Mi. Pika Pika no Mi is pretty broken. It's one of the most broken Devil Fruits in the series. Kizaru is literally light itself, so let's be honest, not many characters are going to be able to even compete with Kizaru just because of that fact. Because A, you need to hit him with Haki, and B, he's probably the fastest character in the series. Kizaru is also able to literally create objects out of his Devil Fruit. So for example, when he fought Rayleigh, he made a light sword. And when he fought Apu, he did some mirror shit with his Devil Fruit. Kizaru is one of those characters where if you blink, you're literally putting yourself at risk because of how fast he moves. He can get behind you in literally an instant and you would never see it coming. And that's just his speed. When we go and look at his attack power with his Devil Fruit, with just a random no-name attack, he was able to blow up an entire tree in Sabaody, which we saw those mangrove trees. They're pretty big. You could even say they're the size of mountains. Now when you combine all of that with Haki, you get a character that literally can go up against any other character in the series. Now we know for a fact that Kizaru has Armament Haki and Advanced Armament Haki. Now I'm not sure if he's shown to use Observation Haki, but for the sake of the video I'm gonna assume that he has it because we've seen even the most basic characters have basic amounts of Observation Hakis. Now we've seen Kizaru use especially Advanced Armament Haki, and that was when in Marineford, Whitebeard launched an attack and the 3 Admirals blocked the attack with Advanced Armament Haki. So to have Advanced Armament Haki, which means he has at least basic as well. We then look at Kizaru's swordsmanship. He was able to go toe-to-toe with Rayleigh in a sword fight. Even though Rayleigh's no longer in his prime, I think Rayleigh's swordsmanship is still very similar to what it was, even though he doesn't have the same attack power, maybe because that's due to his Haki or due to his physical strength. He still has the skill of a swordsman. And I think we can all agree that Rayleigh was also using Haki when he fought Kizaru back in Sabaody. Due to the fact that he was able to hit Kizaru's light sword or lightsaber, whatever you want to call it, you can then also make the assumption that Kizaru was also using Armament Haki. Now whether or not Rayleigh used Advanced Conqueror's Haki during that exchange, that's up for debate. That's not really something we can kind of assume because Oda has said nothing about it and there was no Black Lightning or any signs of Conqueror's Haki, maybe because it was too early in the series. But for now I'm gonna say Rayleigh wasn't using Advanced Conqueror's Haki and just Armament Haki. Because if Rayleigh wasn't using Armament Haki, he would have been able to slice through his light sword, but instead it was more of a clash between the two. Now time and time again, Kizaru has shown that he's one of the top characters in the series when it comes to strength. We've seen him against a supernova where he absolutely bodied all of them. Zoro, Luffy, Apu, Hawkins, all of them. But at the same time, you can't really use that as a reference because this is a time where majority of the characters didn't even have Haki or know what Haki was. So it was really easy for Kizaru because you can't hit Kizaru. So like when you saw Usopp start shooting his slingshot balls at Kizaru, they just phased right through him. And let's be honest, all the Straw Hats, or most of them, would have been dead if Rayleigh and Kuma weren't there. Zoro was literally about to die to Kizaru's hands, but Rayleigh saved him. Then when we look at the fight that are brought up over and over again, Rayleigh versus Kizaru, we see that Kizaru is literally holding his own against Rayleigh, and I would say even overpowering Rayleigh, because we saw Rayleigh did bring up the fact and acknowledge that Kizaru is a very powerful foe, and that he's not in his prime, but it's a hard fight for him. And I think if the fight went on longer, Kizaru definitely would have beaten Rayleigh. And I think we can all automatically assume that old Rayleigh's stronger than first commander level, or majority of first commanders, because first commander level is sort of a tricky power system. Well, the entire power system isn't very linear. There's more to it than just first commander, second commander, because you have different tiers within those levels. So for example, you can't really compare Ben Beckman to the rest of the first commanders, and you can't really compare Akainu to the rest of the admirals. By that would mean Kizaru is also ahead of pretty much all first commanders, other than maybe Ben Beckman, because we saw when Green Bull took out King and Queen, he was referring to them as inferior because he's an admiral and they're only commanders. And until I can be proven otherwise, Green Bull for me is one of the weaker admirals. I would say even weaker than Fujitora, but he was still able to go against, yes, maybe a weakened King and Queen, but he was still able to pretty much defeat them and, you know, send them off to the Marines or prison. And we also saw him fight commander level characters, aka the Scabbards, who are, for the most part, some of them are commander level characters, like Nekamamushi, Inarashi, Kinemon maybe. And then when we go to look at Marineford is more tricky because a lot of characters were just fighting each other. It wasn't definitive one-on-ones, it was more, I fight you for a couple seconds and I go fight somebody else for a couple seconds, and we saw Kizaru do that a lot. So when Kizaru fought Marco, he was able to overpower Marco. There were some circumstances where, yeah, it was with the help of the surrounding area. There's a lot going on, but Kizaru was still able to overpower him and put sea stone cuffs onto him. And then we also saw Kizaru versus Whitebeard, and we saw Kizaru was able to actually pierce Whitebeard's body with his devil fruit power. And that in itself is a pretty big feat, even though, yeah, Whitebeard doesn't have the same durability as someone like Kaido. Whitebeard's still considered the strongest man, the strongest pirate as well. Even Kaido put him in his top 4, top 5. And there is one scene in particular in Marineford where it's sort of an iffy thing, because it's when Ben Beckman shows up, and it's assumed that Ben Beckman sort of scared Kizaru or frightened him just a little bit, because Kizaru puts his hands up and pretends that he's afraid, I would say, of Ben Beckman. Now I think it was sarcastic and Kizaru wasn't really serious when Ben Beckman was pointing his weapon at him and Kizaru raised his hand up. But if you want to take that literally, then you could see that as an L for Kizaru and him not being as strong as we think he was. But that's sort of when the confusion sets in, because we've seen the scene in Wano where Akainu and Kizaru are talking and Kizaru asks Akainu to go to Wano, but Akainu, you know, tells him no, he can't. But Kizaru's pretty confident in him going up against 2 Yonko, or you could even say 3 Yonko, because Luffy does unlock Advanced Conqueror's Haki and does awaken in Wano. So it's hard to say, because if he was quote unquote weaker than these characters, I don't think he would be so confident in going over there by himself. And then that's where it puts a lot of people in a tricky situation on whether or not they think Admirals and Yonko are equal or lesser than each other, or one's better, one's lesser. Now, I'm on the belief that yes, Yonkos are stronger than Admirals except Akainu, but that Admirals are very close in strength to Yonkos. So if you were to put the weakest Admiral against the weakest Yonko, even still, I think it would be a high diff fight. Maybe even extreme diff. So first things first is Kizaru versus Big Mom. I personally believe that Kizaru takes Big Mom in an extreme diff fight, but that's because I believe Big Mom is also the weakest Yonko. But if you put Kizaru up against someone like Kaido, Shanks, and Whitebeard, Kizaru loses that fight. But it's at least a high diff. But I don't think an Admiral can be mid-diffed by anyone in the series, other than, you know, you can get into the topic of Imu. Imu might be one of those characters where he's sort of like a Kaguya situation. Now, since Kizaru is showing up to Egghead Island, I might as well talk about Luffy. I think Luffy wins, but at the same time, it's an extreme diff fight. It's sort of like when Kaido and Luffy went at it. It's going to be extreme diff, but it's not going to be to the point where Luffy's defeated over and over and over again like when he fought Kaido. So at the end of the day, I put Kizaru in my top 10. I think he takes a lot of characters to a high diff fight. Not that he wins it, but the other characters win it. So for example, like Mihawk, Shanks, all these characters, I believe they beat Kizaru, but it's not an easy fight for anybody. And unless proven otherwise, I'm gonna keep that stance until, who knows, Kizaru gets mid-diffed by Zoro or mid-diffed by Luffy. I'm gonna keep that standpoint. So that wraps up the video. Let me know in the comment section down below how strong you think Kizaru is, and I would love to hear your guys' opinions.